Let's look into this. Hunter Biden is testifying behind closed doors for the impeachment hearings that are going on. And this whole impeachment thing, if there was any justice in the world, we would actually see the burn marks on James Comer. We don't. You can't see the actual road rash that he has. But here he is on Fox Business trying to deal with the fallout from his central witness in the impeachment case. This Alexander Smirnov, who was an FBI informant who is now literally in jail because a judge is worried he's a flight risk because he lied to the FBI starting in 2020. Apparently, Smirnov's name was mentioned 2,600 times at a minimum on Fox News over the past year in regards to, or referenced as the informant, because for a while he was anonymous. And Comer is now on a tour saying, like, well, this isn't the only thing that we had, but it was the fundamental building block. Everything about the $5 million Burisma bribe came from this guy. And he says he got it from Russian agents. So here's James Comer on Fox Business.
You look, they've indicted even more is coming out about the informant, what role he played for the FBI. The FBI paid him to be a spy in Russia. They indicted him because he was communicating with Russia, but that's what they paid him for over 10 years to do. So I don't know anything about Smirnov. But
pause it for 1 second. Okay. They didn't pay him. They didn't indict him because he was communicating with Russia. They indicted him because he was lying at the behest of Russia. Like, James Comer is smart enough to understand the concept of you're an agent for us, or you're an informant, or you're a double agent for the other guys. And Comer is pissed here because the FBI kept saying, this is not reliable. And then he tried to drag in the head of the FBI and said, release this document. And they're like, it's not reliable. We are building a case. And still, he's pissed now that he has so much egg on his face.
For over 10 years to do. So I don't know anything about Smirnov, but the circumstances around his indictment and his rearrest and the changing of the original indictment by Weiss is very concerning, because everything that I've had to do with the FBI has been very suspicious throughout this investigation. The trust level that I have with the FBI is zero, Maria. And look, we're following the money. Smirnov never was a key part of this investigation, never was a part of the investigation at all, because we couldn't.
It was just one more confirmation for you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You look.
One more confirmation. So in other words, money exists. That's where they are in the investigation so far. Money exists. Amazing. James Comer, the one thing I will say is good for him for having the guts to go on any show. Granted, he's just going on like Maria Bartiromo's show. He's not even going on like the more skeptical Fox News hosts, because they would roast him. But good for him, because he could have easily decided to essentially lock himself in his house and say like, oh, I can't find the key, or, I'm on vacation, or I got to spend more time with my family. But this blew up in their faces. And I think that it's actually going to blow up. It's going to metastasize now, because there's no indication that Smirnov wants to, suffer this alone. And a lot of this stuff was around the 2020 re-election campaign of Donald Trump. Smirnov was not just freelancing out there, decided to do this. There were other elements around him that were promoting this, and I suspect they're going to find out that some of these were, sort of people who are heavily invested in Donald Trump winning again. Here is Ken Buck on Newsmax. Ken Buck, I don't really care about Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, but when you're a Republican and you're set to retire and you, I don't know if Ken Buck is independently wealthy or has a business to go to, but I would almost guarantee you that Ken Buck is not interested necessarily in going into too much lobbying. He's getting his money from somewhere else. And then it's sort of like a Bullworth situation where they don't want to really piss off their Republican friends. They still got to go back to their neighborhoods, but they're not going to play along. And here's Ken Buck basically saying like, yeah, this whole idea of Joe Biden going and pressuring Ukraine to fire the prosecutor was not a function of Burisma. It was because the guy wasn't investigating Burisma. And it was stated policy of the United States.
And then when you take it all together, when you take that, and then you take the fact that there's millions of dollars going to every member of the Biden family, and for some reason it needs to be laundered through these shell companies to get there. And let's start off with Ukraine. What do you say to that portion of it? Go ahead and respond to that.
Yeah. What I say about Ukraine is that there were European Union officials across Europe who were asking the Ukrainian leadership to fire Shokin. This wasn't something that was a one-time deal with Vice President Biden. There were other officials. There were U.S. senators. And I think that Senator Johnson may have been one of them. And I may be mistaken on that, but I thought that he had actually asked for Shokin to be fired before Shokin was fired. So there were a number of people in the U.S.
The Obama White House was praising that prosecutor general just months before they flipped and ended up pushing and leveraging that money to get him fired.
Pause it for 1 second. Now he's being a little bit convoluted here because he's saying the Obama administration changed their opinion on Shokin. Now we would have to believe that Joe Biden walks in and goes like, I actually think this Shokin guy is a good guy. Remember now, the timing is that Hunter Biden's not working for Burisma or on the Burisma board, for until the future.
Obama be like, "Hey, Joe, does your boy have anything to say about this Ukraine policy?"
Biden comes in and says, "I want to shift our policy for no reason." No. The U.S. government shifted policy because Europe pressured the United States and said, like, this is a problem we have with, trade with Ukraine, that we can't rely on them to uphold any laws because Shokin's so corrupt. But he sort of like, tries to sort of like make, like, who is he talking about here? Like, go back just a little bit.
The idea that the Biden mafia, not like the EU or the IMF or NATO, is who is in Obama's mind when he's making these determinations is so ridiculous.
The Obama White House was praising that prosecutor general just months before they flipped and ended up pushing and leveraging that money to get him fired.
Leveraging that money to get him fired.
There were senators, there were European Union officials, there were many others that thought that Shokin was not doing a sufficient job of rooting out corruption in Ukraine and had asked for him to be fired. So the record is absolutely clear that there were advocates and there were folks who were strongly opposed to Shokin sitting in that position.
Why do you think you're one of the only Republicans that takes issue with this? I mean, you're also one of the only Republicans that voted not to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. I mean, some might say that you have a different agenda here. I don't know many people that can look at this list of what I mean. In your heart of hearts, do you really believe that Joe Biden had absolutely no idea how his family was raking in millions and millions of dollars around the world? His brother, his son, his granddaughter, and his nieces.
All right, so we don't need to go anymore here because, we all know how all these people were raking in the money. they were trading on their name like every other politician's kid or brother.
I think George Bush became president.
Exactly. Like, are we going to have to dig into Jared Kushner's multi-billion-dollar deal with the Saudis?
I mean, yeah, put that on the scale next to the Biden mafia's take.
Oh my God. Yes, nepotism exists. I wonder who this guy's dad is. Yeah. I wonder where Rob Schmidt, how he got that job. And then they move on to the impeachment of Department of Homeland Secretary Mayorkas. Now, I will tell you that the Biden administration's sort of stance on immigration right now is trying to convince, I don't know, some writer at The Atlantic that they don't like immigrants as much as the Republicans don't like immigrants. But the problem with trying to impeach Mayorkas, and my understanding is it may not even get a vote at the Senate. They may just like summarily dismiss it. There's like unanimous consent. We're not going to deal with this. It's such a joke. And you don't hear as much about this because of the Swazi election. Because the Republicans are like, oh, well, we got to figure out another angle on this. But here is this, what's this guy's name from Newsmax? Rob Schmidt asking that same Ken Buck, why aren't you supporting the impeachment of Mayorkas?
That's the question that we have to answer before we impeach a president that has been duly elected by the American public. And that's the issue right now. They impeached Trump twice. I voted against both those impeachments because they did not have evidence of a high crime or misdemeanor. We did not have evidence of a high crime or misdemeanor with Alejandro Mayorkas. I stood with Tom McClintock. I stood with Mike Gallagher, two very bright, very strong Republicans and very strong on the border.
You take a job to secure the border of a country, and your mission turns into, instead of securing it, to open it up and to just exploit it for what seems to be obvious political gain. How is Alejandro Mayorkas?
Pause it for 1 second. Now, this whole notion of, first off, obviously they did not just open up the border. That's just absurd. They didn't do any, I mean, it would be great if they had done even like a quarter of what he's claiming that they would do. But this whole exploit it for politics, you understand what that means, right? They think that they're letting in immigrants to, I guess, vote, even though immigrants who come in with papers can rarely end up voting within a decade. If they vote within a decade, things are moving impressively quickly. So the idea, like, this is full on Donald Trump saying in 2016 there were 3 million votes that were bussed into New Hampshire of illegal immigrants, and that's why he lost the popular election. That's the level we're on now. But Ken Buck has to pretend like, oh boy, I don't know. He's got to maintain he's got to be able to go to the country club and not get screamed at.
You're the border of a country, and your mission turns into, instead of securing it, to open it up and to just exploit it for what seems to be obvious political gain. How is Alejandro Mayorkas, I mean, high crimes, misdemeanors, whatever you want to call it. I mean, when your job is to
whatever
secure
you
a country,
want to call it in terms of the Constitution,
and you just let everybody come in and you invite everybody in and you bring in all that crime and misery. You've had a young girl that was killed in the state of Georgia by a migrant from Venezuela. I don't understand how that doesn't meet the bar of impeachment for Mayorkas.
Well, what's the crime? What's the crime? Yeah, I mean, 18 United States Code.
What about public trust?
You tell me, Rob, what is the crime?
I think lying to the public over and over again, telling them that the border is secure, I think that should be a crime. I mean, I think it should be a crime to take a job and to exploit it for just the opposite. Is it not?
Well, it's not a crime to take a job and exploit it for the opposite, but in terms of lying to Congress, that is a crime. And in his opinion, the border was secure. In my opinion, it's not secure. In your opinion, it's not secure. But when you start getting into opinions and charging people under 18 United States Code 1001 with a false statement, that gets very specific, and he would not.
All right, we don't need to hear any more of this. He just thinks it should be a crime. And you get into the technical stuff about high crimes and misdemeanors. Like,
Learn about free speech there.
do we need to do about any of that stuff? Amazing. It is amazing. Like, this is, they're just so spinning down into like just this incredible wormhole
Of hysteria and paranoia. Like, the border has never been secure, as they term it. Like, that's not, it's always been permeable. We should basically just accept that.
Lastly, let's just do this while we're talking about the impeachment follies. And it really has, they're just fallen apart. I mean, this is an environment where, and look, it's possible it happens. It's possible the Republicans lose the House, they lose the Senate, Joe Biden wins, ekes out a victory in a couple of states and wins, because the Republican Party is a disaster. I mean, this is a disastrous party. They're careening towards a government shutdown. All of their top leadership of their committees are resigning. Like, literally a half a dozen chairs of committees in the majority are resigning. They're leaving Congress because they realize, like, this is a disaster, a slow-moving disaster.
Buck, who we just watched, is leaving Congress, but he's a little bit older. Mike Gallagher, who he mentioned is like, smart principal guy, the head of the China committee, he's not even 40 and he retired.
Oh, I mean, these are people who, like, this is, when you're the chair of a committee, you're living on easy street because people are just coming, lining up to give you money. You don't have to make as many phone calls. You've got the Republican National Committee is about to be taken over by Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, who's just going to use all the money to pay off his legal bills.
She looks good on TV.
Their impeachment blew up in their faces. They have passed half the amount of legislation of the prior most ineffective Congress in the history of the country, or at least in the modern times, when people weren't taking horse and buggies to get to the House. And they're a disaster. I mean, so it's quite possible they're all going to get just voted out, but it should be much worse for them than it is at this point. But here's Fox and Friends, Brian Kilmeade and Steve Doocy getting into a little tiff with each other about how useless this whole impeachment stuff is. This I enjoy.
Smirnoff was somebody that they had for 14 years. He was a credible person. They paid him a lot of money, and that was just part of the investigation. People wanted to close the books on it.
Sounds like he was working with the Russians.
Right.
That's the problem.
But that's what it seems like lately. But for 14 years, everything he did held up. I mean, what is the FBI doing for a screening process, or does Smirnoff...
Pause it for 1 second. Now, again, the reality is, and I would think like Kilmeade knows this, although he doesn't seem to, and Doocy is just enjoying, like, this is the first time in Doocy's career where he's been able to just sort of like, all I got to do is drop one line and I just destroy Kilmeade. And you could see Doocy's really feeling his oats. This guy, remember when he used to be like, he would say something, he'd be all sheepish and he'd be nervous.
Yeah.
And now he's just got this swagger of like, the whole thing that you were pushing turns out to be a complete fraud. And Doocy's a conservative.
It's a character arc I wouldn't have expected from Doocy.
But Kilmeade knows, like, the FBI was saying, this is not, we do not believe this form, but you guys are pushing it and pushing it. Go back a little bit. It's funny to watch these two. And poor Ainsley Earhart is just in the middle there like, Sean told me not to talk about this.
that was just part of the investigation. People wanted to close the books on it.
Sounds like he was working with the Russians.
Right.
That's the problem.
But that's what it seems like lately. But for 14 years, everything he did held up. I mean, what is the FBI doing for a screening process, or does Smirnoff have a story to tell?
Yeah, David, I wish this were not closed doors. We'd all like to see and hear what he's
100%.
saying. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, yes. You bet. Thank you.
You bet. So this is coming at a critical moment for the Republicans' impeachment inquiry. And on Capitol Hill, a lot of Republican lawmakers say they have seen zero evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. And right now, the Republicans do not have enough votes to impeach. And after dozens of interviews and over 100,000 documents released to the committees, the Republicans have yet to produce any direct evidence of misconduct by Joe Biden.
But man, does this look absolutely terrible. 150 suspicious activity reports around them. Joe Biden was in on meetings with every major deal regarding Hunter Biden. He said, my dad is sitting next to me while talking to a Chinese CEFC official.
Many phone calls. There's a $200,000 check that was paid to Biden. Then you've got inexperienced Hunter Biden, who admitted that to ABC in an interview. He said, I don't really have any experience in this. Then why are you on the board?
Well, and the other thing was he was trying to get on the board of this Chinese company when it wasn't clear that he was running for president, when he was a former vice president at the time. And why are you emailing over a pseudo address if you don't want people to know, if you don't mind people knowing what you do or do not know about your son's business? And when he looked Peter in the eye and said, I know nothing about my son's overseas business dealings, he was flat out lying.
And then a few weeks later, here's the picture of him on the golf course with the business partner.
Devin Archer?
Correct.
Maybe he thought he was the caddy.
I think there is evidence.
I think Ainsley, there are many lawmakers who say they've seen zero evidence of high crimes.
But what we just said,
say that they have.
But to impeach somebody, you need direct evidence of misconduct by Joe Biden. Look, Hunter Biden, it sure looks like he traded on his name. And
pause it for 1 second. I love the fact that Steve Ducey is out there and can express like this guy's trading on his name. Now, my son, who coincidentally works for Fox and is in the White House press pool, he can tell he's got more on this. I mean, this is like to hear Kilmeade sputter out all this stuff. $200,000 check, which of course, yes, his brother paid him back because it was a loan. He gave his brother $200,000. His brother gave it back to him.
And he wasn't in office for the $200,000 payment.
But he's just sputtering out all this stuff. It's amazing. They don't even, it's just, it's literally like a drunk guy at the bar.
Yeah.
All right, continue on. This is, and then Ducey's like, it's nepotism for sure. That's a bad thing. I mean,
congrats to Ducey on arriving where we were at all along from this on this story.
Exactly. Nepotism is bad. I mean, present company excluded, of course. Good.
Look, Hunter Biden, it sure looks like he traded on his name, and he's going to have plenty of time
his
today.
Dad, the role his dad has played is key.
We're going to have plenty of time, the Republicans are, to ask him a million questions. It will be interesting to hear what he has to say, but right now, according to Republicans, there's no...
What Republicans?
Some Republicans say they've got the goods on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, but a number of Republicans who I've spoken to on Capitol Hill say there's no direct evidence of misconduct by the current president.
They're just so corrupt.
This is so unbelievable.
Corrupt. And how does Joe Biden have these multi-million-dollar houses? We know what he makes. How does he have? I mean, he had to have gotten money somewhere.
I thought Comer's done a great job with very reluctant witnesses, and Tony Bobolinsky, and then also the business partner who is in jail, where Devin Archer is heading. If you worked with Hunter Biden, you're either dead, missing, or jailed, and that's where he could be heading next.
So Hunter Biden in the hot seat less than 3 hours from right now. We'll bring you as soon as he goes into the...
All right, we don't need to hear any more about that. Amazing.
They're taking the wrong conclusion of all of these people who are treating as star witnesses being either up for going to jail or being in jail. They're taking the wrong conclusion.
The one thing that will be funny if Biden wins is all the people who are in Ducey's ear, like the Republicans who are like, we are so effing stupid. We are blowing it big time. We have such a great opportunity and we can't get out of our way. They're going to be so incensed that they have wasted all their time doing this BS instead of just having someone besides Trump